Okay then, so I'm just going to talk through how you solve the completing the square assignment for anyone who got stuck. You should know that completing the square, you just halve your b coefficient, you square that bracket, and then you take away whatever the square of this number in here is, so just take away the square of that. I still have my plus 2 from before. I now simplify, I get x, and I get minus 14. Now what completing the square does, it tells me whatever makes this bracket 0, whatever the value of x is, so in this case I would make this bracket 0 by saying x equals minus 4, it tells me what the minimum point of the graph is. I know it's a minimum because it's x squared, it's positive. That tells me its graph is going to go like that. So that tells me that my minimum point is that x equals 4 and y is whatever is left. So y is this value here, the minus 14. The second question is very similar, except for the second bit. So I'd halve this coefficient, square it, take away whatever this value here is squared, take away the 4, and then plus 9. Simplify that to get x plus 2 squared plus 5. Now the next part of the question asks, what is the greatest value, or what is the greatest value of 1 over what we have just completed the square on? These are the same things. Now in terms of this graph here, I know that this graph would do that, but as soon as it's a 1 over, I know that my graph does that. So that's why it's asking me what is the greatest point. It's asking me what that point is there. I use my version of the completed square. I know that that 1 over x squared plus 4x plus 9 is really equal to 1 over x plus 2 squared plus 5. So from my completed square there, it's now coming there. Exactly the same thing is true as before. I know that to find my greatest value is the same as finding the minimum value. I have to make this bracket 0, so that means x is equal to minus 2, and then y is whatever is left. Now it's not just 5 this time, it's 1 over 5, so my greatest value would be when x is minus 2 and y is 1/5. Quite a few of you messed up question 3. Take your time, don't rush this question. You want to factorise to get x squared just equal to x squared on its own, so taking the 2 out and also the b coefficient. And I think that's where a few of you would have lost your marks here. That plus 5 I'm leaving outside the bracket. I'm only interested in completing the square on the a and the b coefficient. Now I would complete that square, so I need to have double brackets in here, and I get x plus 1 squared, and then taking away the square of that, which is just 1. Close my brackets there, and still plus 5. Now I need to multiply this out, so I would get 2 brackets x plus 1 squared minus 2 plus 5, which simplifies to give me 2x plus 1 squared plus 3. The second part of the question was really tricky. It asked me, how do I make this thing here, how do I find its greatest value? Well, I know what the graph will look like. Because it's a 1 over x squared, it'll look something like that. It wants to know the maximum point there. In terms of how is this thing here similar to this thing here, and if you check the a's, they're the same. 2x squared here, 2x squared here, and 2x squared here. The b's, 4x, 4x, and the c's, slightly different, plus 9, plus 5. So the way that I make that the same is that I put what it was before, 2x squared plus 4x plus 5, and then I add 4 onto that to make it my plus 9, as that 5 plus the 4 makes the 9 here. So I write it as my 1 over my completed square from before. And the same is true as before. How do I make this bracket equal to 0? Well, that would be when x equals minus 1, and then y is whatever is left over. So once this is equal to 0, 2 times 0 would be 0, and then you get 1 over 3 plus 4, so y would be equal to 1 over 7. Question 4 was actually done very, very well. I don't feel I need to take time to go over it, so I will take straight on to question 5. Question 5 asked me, pretty simple first bit, x squared minus 5x plus 8, which I complete the square to get x minus 2.5 squared, minus, a few of you messed this up, 6.25 plus 8. This is the bit where you messed up. Minus 6.25 plus 8 is plus 1.75. So I complete that square to get that value there. The next question said, what is the value of minus x squared plus 5x minus 8? And you need to use your solution from part A, this solution here, to help you work out what's going on. And if you look at the points here, I've just got literally the opposite every time. So I know that this thing here was my original thing times by minus 1. So minus 1 times by x squared minus 5x plus 8. Bear in mind, I know what this graph will look like. It will be an upside down parabola with a maximum point. I now put my completed square into here. So x minus 2.5 squared, and then that is plus 1.75. I now multiply both parts by the minus 1, which gives me minus bracket x minus 2.5 squared, and then I get minus 1.75. My greatest point is when this bracket is 0 for the x value, so x is equal to 2.5, and y is equal to whatever is left. So y equals minus 1.75. It's absolutely fine to leave your answers as fractions here. A couple of you also did that. Finally, number 6, very, very similar to number 5. You wanted to multiply that by minus 1 to complete the square. Make sure that you do this in 2 steps. A couple of you messed up by trying to rush it. Take your time. It's easy to make mistakes on this. So that gives me x minus 3 squared, then minus that 9, and then plus the 7. A couple of you didn't actually multiply this by the minus 1. It's absolutely fine to leave that minus 7 outside the bracket if you wish. It doesn't make any difference, but I prefer getting everything in. So now I get minus 1, I have x minus 3 squared, and then minus 9 plus 7 gives me minus 2. Now I will multiply everything in this bracket here by the minus 1. So now I know what my maximum point is. I know it's a maximum because my graph was minus x squared there. So that tells me it's going to look like that. I know what its maximum point is. I've just worked it out. I know where it's got to cross the y-axis. It's got to cross the y-axis at minus 7. A few of you making mistakes there. Be careful. If I do a very quick sketch of my axes there, I know what the x value must be. The x value must be whatever makes that bracket 0. So x equals 3 and y equals whatever's left, so positive 2. So at 3, 2, that's my maximum point. It must cross at -7, and now I can sketch a parabola like that. I don't need to worry about these solutions here. I've not been asked to use factorising or anything to work that out. That concludes the completing the square assignment.